5 techniques to hypnotize even the most resistant people or clients you encounter. You know, that person that no matter what you say, they always have something to argue with, or they just never really listen to what you say. They never pay attention enough and stop for a minute so that they can absorb all the suggestions you are giving to them. The first technique here is going to be kind of a framework, the setup for every other technique presented in this video. The first one is about hypnotizing yourself first. And what do I mean by that is that many times when you see a hypnotist on stage or people who can do a rapid induction on somebody, quite often those people, the hypnotists here, are going in trance themselves first, and that's how they are leading the mind of the person in front of them to drop down and settle down and drop the anxiety of I'm going to be manipulated, and it calms them down, and from there whatever they say is going to be absorbed and hit their unconscious mind much more easily because they are in trance themselves. And it can be a very subtle change in the way they look at the person or in their voice tonality, so subtle that you may not even notice it if you are not yourself a trained hypnotist already. And basically, how do you achieve that? Very simple. You take the habit of listening to hypnotic tracks. Take some from somebody that you identify with, maybe a hypnotist you know personally in real life, or maybe just hypnotic tracks you have found online, but it has to be from somebody you find legitimate in what he or she does. Once you have that, you are used to get down in trance and core by whatever way you can. It can be, touching the fingers somehow, or it can be a drop of voice tonality. Whenever I use a certain voice tonality with my hand like this, I'm kind of going into trance because I have done that so many times that this movement like toward the ground and my drop of tonality, even if it is very subtle, like right here I just did it on the subtle, or like I higher the pitch, but it can be subtle. It is kind of this self-encore that puts me back into a state where I go in trance, and if I go in trance and I speak for 15 minutes in trance, at some point you're gonna drop at least a little bit yourself. That is the idea here. So using a self-encore by whatever means you can is the kind of the foundation for hypnotizing resistant people, because they won't even see that unless you're really a beginner, you're not used to it in the very beginning. But as soon as you have some experience, people won't even see that you are going in trance and that whatever you say now is coming from a place of a deep hypnotic state. And from that state, it is way easier to influence people and to make them lose their barriers, drop down their defenses, because you are there yourself. So you go first. That is one of the essential rules of covert hypnosis. You go first into the state you want them to go into, and from there everything is easier and smoother. The second big technique here is to use a story, a certain story, not necessarily specific about the words, but about the topic. The topic of the story has to be in whatever way you want, but it has to be about a boxer or a boxing game or anything like that. There was a famous story by Richard Bandler. He talked about being in a hospital, and a guy was unconscious, not because of boxing, but because the guy was in a coma, and no doctor had any explanation for it, or no doctor could really predict, could really say if that person was going to get up or not. The story Bandler tells about that is, I went into the room and I knew this guy had been a boxer in his life, so I just put the bell, the ding ding ding, the bell of the boxing game in the room, and I just hit it and said something like, "The game is starting tonight, Mrs. and gentlemen," something like that. And from what Bandler says, maybe it is a false story, but whatever, the guy woke up and punched Bandler in the face. Whatever the point is it a true story or not? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, whatever. The point is that by talking about somebody who is into an unconscious state, just pause for a minute and think of how many embedded commands you can feel in that story. By talking about a guy who is in a coma, so maybe who has been dropped down in a coma from a boxing game or anything else you want to talk about, Just talking about somebody who is in a coma will allow you to pause your voice, and every time you speak, talk about this guy, can say, and that guy was completely unconscious. No word, no thoughts, he was completely down into his own head. Down into his own head, no thoughts, no words. All of those are metaphoric embedded commands for the trance state. So if you enumerate a story like that and filling all your embedded commands with down, dropping all the resistance because he was down in a comfortable state, even if it is not comfortable to be in a coma, arguably maybe it is. Never been there myself, so I don't know. Or maybe one time, oh well, it was alcohol, it was not coma, okay? Don't judge me. But just talking about a story like that, I don't know where this is going, talking about a story like that can allow you to use many embedded commands that can make your client or the person you're talking to drop down a little bit. You know, through stories, people receive much more messages than through just basic orders given, like, now I want you to do this. Many people just don't even want to obey, or maybe they do because they are forced. If you are a police officer, they are forced to obey, but they don't like it. A story, though, is leading their mind without forcing them. That is really the power of story. And speaking of that, number 3 right here is another story, this time not with the topic of the boxer going unconscious, knocked out, knocked down. This is one way. Another way, which won't be talking about the unconscious state here or getting down in trance, it is not about that here. Third technique, a story again, this time about any sort of highly empowered charismatic figure. I usually refer to the mob boss. You know, the mafia boss. An archetype I use in many stories I tell during sessions, which might just refer to a movie I have seen. Everybody has seen the Godfather movie, pretty easy one. Or I might mention some people I met in real life. Not on that level, but I met some weird, dangerous people here and there. Basically, just mentioning somebody like that, you know, somebody, either a mob boss or just any person, or a general in the army, whatever it is, just somebody who is highly charismatic. The point of using a story that talks about somebody like that is that you are going to again use embedded commands. It is going to be a very easy topic to insert embedded commands about, for example, and this person, the mob boss, he just, whenever he was entering the room, anywhere he was going, everybody was shutting down because of that presence he had. Everybody was attentive to him and didn't say a word when he was around. If you know what I'm doing here, I'm just using all those embedded commands in that story to get your brain in a state where you shut up and you focus on me, you focus on the story at hand. That is the idea of helping the unconscious mind of the person you're talking to focus here. Focus on something and stop evaporating into something else, thinking about a million things and interrupting you because they're not really attentive. When you tell a story like that, you help their mind to drop down maybe the anxiety also, because some people are very anxious because they are afraid you ask them something uncomfortable, so they talk and talk and talk and talk. And telling a story like that can help to put people at ease. And when they are calmed down, when they are more relaxed, it makes it easier from there. Once they are in that state, it makes it easier to tell them any suggestions for well-being, to elaborate on a process they can use to get rid of their addiction, whatever is the topic of the session you have with your client. It is just easier once they are in a state like that, calm down and stop worrying about a million things at the same time and not paying attention enough to what you say. Many people, especially with their phone today, and even worse since the pandemic, are just conditioned to constantly be busy, constantly keep their mind busy by scrolling. They don't even know anymore what it means to shut up, be in the present moment right now. Many people don't even know anymore what it means, what it feels like to be in the moment. So stories like that can help to get their mind back in the moment right here and now. with me. And technique number 4 is to present an exercise, to provide an exercise for people. If you are in a session, you just tell them that this is an exercise you are going to make them go through that only 1% of people can succeed at, or 10%, or whatever the percentage is. Just you frame that. For example, you give them an exercise of counting backward as they turn around themselves in a circle, like those exercises you give to alcoholic people that are controlled by the police when they are driving drunk, those kind of things. Whatever it is, just an exercise, mental exercise, whatever it is, but you just frame it as only 10% of people are smart enough to succeed at this. If you can do it, you are among the 10%. The point of that is that, of course, it's gonna be easy enough for them to succeed, like counting backwards 2 by 2, so from 15, so 15, 13, 11, 9, 7, blah blah blah. And at the same time, you have to touch your head with different hands, whatever, just something made up. Once they have succeeded at that, at an exercise that they think is difficult, they're gonna drop down their resistance, because they're gonna feel like, oh, I won, ha! Especially with people who have a big ego, or who want to prove that they are smarter, or maybe just who are frightened about you telling them things they don't want to hear. So it is really in a therapeutic session. Maybe you can use that to make them feel like, okay, you have won already. You don't have anything else to prove to me because you have won. Once you make them in a state of being validated, their resistance drops down, and they are much more much more like receptive to what you say, because now they feel validated. They feel like they are in control of the situation because they have won. They will be like, yeah, I'm better than you. Oh yeah, you are. From that state, you can infuse much more embedded commands or suggestions, or tell them about something. They won't resist as much if they feel like they are already on top of you anyway. And finally, number 5, some sneaky techniques I know, but it is really useful sometimes. Number 5, when you are inside a group, this one is not really for a therapeutic session, it is more if you are doing street hypnosis maybe, or stage hypnosis, or maybe in a party if you want, or just when you have a group of people. The idea to demonstrate authority and add up more presence, more charisma, and more authority over your skills in the head of the people watching you and listening to you, it is to talk about the story of somebody being hypnotized. Nothing complex, just mention, oh yeah, I went to see a hypnotist when I was 7 years old on stage, and somebody from the audience was hypnotized. Very basic story here, and you just describe what the hypnotic state looked like from your perspective. How did you see the person dropping down, eyes closed, all of that. You describe a hypnotic story. The point of that is when you have a group in front of you, you just pay attention for who is the most suggestible, who is really reacting to all the vocal expressions you have. If you say and the person fell down on the ground, keep your ears open when you say fell down on the ground for any person in the group who would be doing a reaction like that. Means the person is really connected to what you say. So from there, if there is 5 people in front of me and I talk about this person I saw being hypnotized in the street, and that person just fell down on the ground, and I noticed the person on my left, right here, on your right here, just went like, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go to that person specifically, and I'm going to say, can I have your hand for a minute? And then you can do the classical, handshake interrupt, and look at here inside your hand, and now you can focus on this point inside your hand, and blah blah blah. You just get them into a trance. But the point is, if you do that with somebody who has already demonstrated a reaction to what you say, that person will be like 90% more likely to get down in a hypnotic state, opposite to a person who would have had 0 reaction so far. Those people might be more difficult to get into trance. It is usually still possible, but it might be more difficult. They might have more resistance. They might not trust you as much. Many reasons here. If it is somebody who has already shown a reaction, either verbal like, really? Or something like a big facial expression like like that, anything that is big enough for you to notice and spot it, then if you go directly to that person and do a rapid induction, it is way more likely to work because their facial expression or behavior has already demonstrated that that person was accepting the authority you have about the topic of hypnosis or about your vocal tonality, whatever it is. It can be a million different things that can cause that reaction, but just that person right now is reacting unconsciously to what you say. There is a connection between your words, your communication, and their mind. So you go to that person, you hypnotize that person, it's going to go way faster, they're going to drop down way faster in trance, and from there, having the other people, that is the point here, the other people having seen you going to a random person, even if from your perspective it is not a random person because you have checked who to go to. But from the perspective of people who don't know about hypnosis, you just went to a random person like that and you got them into trance, into a hypnotic state where they had their eyes closed, drop down like this. From there, people are going to have much more positive expectations, let's say, about your skills. They are going to presuppose much more easily that, yes, it works, you can do that. Whereas people who don't know you, they have never seen you, they don't really trust hypnosis anyway, it might be more difficult to get them to trust enough the process or you to fall into a trance that easily. A last very important point about how to get people into a trance faster and bypass all their resistance is to use pattern interrupts. And you have by now a new course on that just down below that you can still have access to. It will show you 19 different ways of using a conversational pattern interrupt so that people interrupt their trail of thoughts, listen carefully, and not obey, but respond more easily to the suggestions you give to them during a session. It is down below, it is still available, and I will see you pretty soon in the next video, my friend.